Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, welcome along. It's the Mark Steyn Show, live on your telly and on your wireless simultaneously and without breaking a sweat. Tonight, why are the global mega corporations hot for war? Also, Sir Keir Starmer is not the only one demanding why can't a woman be more like a man? Plus, the victims not of COVID, but of COVID policy. And Ukraine's youngest MP will be here. Plus, the one thing we can never get enough of, your questions and comments. Send them along to gbviews at gbnews.uk. You can do a few Bono-type limericks if you want as well. You can also tweet me at GBNews. All that coming up after Ray Addison with the latest news.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Sir David Amess murder trial has heard the accused threaten to kill 4 more people after he attacked the MP. The court was shown CCTV footage of the suspect, Ali Harbi Ali, travelling to Sir David's constituency in Essex in October last year. A 999 call made by Yvonne Eves, who had an appointment to see the MP, was later played to the jury.
Big emergency.
Please, quick now. The man is wielding a knife and he's threatened me. He's killed David Amess at Belfast Methodist Church.
Can you see how big the knife is?
Yes, it's a carving knife, a big kitchen carving knife. We're trying to get it off him. He won't be. He's threatened myself. He's threatened 4 people here.
All right, bear with me.
We need an ambulance as well. He wants to get shot, apparently. He wants to be a hero. He wants the police to come and shoot him.
Who? What, the person with the knife?
Yes. You need an armed response unit here.
We have, yeah.
He's coming. You can get in round the back of the church, apparently. But he's wielding the knife. He's in, the churchy bit where all the congregations sit. He's wielding the knife now. He says if we go near him, he will stab us, me and my partner, and the 2 ladies from the constituency here.
The voice of Yvonne Eves. Ukraine's president has issued more dire warnings about the deteriorating situation in his country. 300,000 people trapped in the occupied city of Kherson are said to be running out of food and medical supplies. And Russian forces are being accused of blocking humanitarian corridors and preventing supplies from reaching the city of Mariupol. The RMT union has accused P&O Ferries of blackmail after the company announced it's offering sacked staff more than £36 million in compensation. The payouts will be linked to their period of service, with 40 of the 800 employees set to receive more than £100,000. However, the RMT says if staff don't sign up, giving away their right to take the case to an employment tribunal, they'll receive a fraction of the amount. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have been filmed diving off the coast of Belize as they continued their royal tour marking the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. William and Kate donned scuba gear to check out the 2nd largest barrier reef in the world. The trip came ahead of a visit to the Bahamas, where there have been protests. Campaigners are calling for the British monarchy to pay reparations for slavery and apologise for human rights abuses. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Mark Steyn.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States.
The governor and I, and we were all doing a tour of the library here, and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
There is such significance to the passage of time, is that it? For example, if you just watch that clip, that's 30 seconds of the passage of time you'll never get back. It's gone, it's flown the coop. It's out there playing among the stars while space aliens from planet Zongo laugh their intergalactic socks off at you, squandering 30 seconds of the passage of time to listen to Kamala Harris. And what about me? Where do I stand in the great passage of time? I had an hour of sparkling, insightful analysis all ready to go, and then I thought, Kamala's right. There's nothing as significant as the passage of time. I mean, that's heavy. That's one deep trip she's laying on me. And I mean the fact that it's decades since I can recall even hearing the vernacular expression about anyone laying heavy trips on you testifies itself to the passage of time and its significance. Kamala Harris is telling us to lay back, smell the daisies, watch the paint dry. Out there around the world, men are invading neighboring countries, driving up the price of fuel, developing next month's COVID variant, drafting plans for mandatory digital ID. But they're all missing the significance of the passage of time. Is there a tiresome old hippie with a song on the theme? Why, yes, there is.
The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. Any fool can do it. There ain't nothing to it.
You don't say. Joe Biden, the dead husk of a moth-eaten sock puppet currently being passed off as leader of the free world, is enjoying the passage of time in his basement watching reruns of Columbo. If at some point he forgets to come out of the basement, he will be succeeded as leader of the free world by Kamala Harris, which is a remarkable thought. The Constitution of the United States prescribes certain conditions and qualifications for the citizen representatives elected to preside over the people's government, and yet the great republic has wound up in the hands of a dead husk and a valley girl who keeps rehearsing her Miss America, My Plans for World Peace speech in public. Clearly, these two don't run anything. We all know that. In fact, whoever's running Kamala Harris doesn't run anything, because whoever writes her tweets and speeches keeps saying that Ukraine is in NATO, which it isn't. And it shouldn't have to be necessary to have to point that out to Joe Biden's principal emissary to the continent known as Europe. So the executive branch of the United States is in the hands of persons unknown. It's odd, very odd. One is reluctant to give credence to the notion that Klaus Schwab and his Spectre board meeting at Davos are in control of everything. Oh, I tell you what, I always love seeing this. Can we have that picture of Klaus Schwab in his official World Economic Forum madman bent on world domination uniform? Let's have a look at it. Oh, wonderful. I'm afraid you're growing rather tiresome, Mr. Bond. Actually, one of our viewers, Walt Trimmer, reprimands me for comparing Klaus Schwab to Blofeld or Darth Sidious, and says he's more like Ming the Merciless from Flash Gordon. Let's have a look at that one, shall we? Yes, as you can see, that's Ming the Merciless on the left and Klaus Schwab on the right. Who is actually running things while Kamala Harris is out there talking drivel and Emmanuel Macron is wearing a hoodie and designer stubble and Boris Johnson is making plans for an underwater roundabout at the bottom of the Irish Sea? Let me know what you think. Who's really running things? GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can Twitter me at GBNews. One possibility is that maybe it's just the new mega woke global corporations. After all, they're currently waging cultural blitzkrieg on Russia. That's to say, no Facebook for you Ruskies, no Pornhub for you, no Netflix for you, no sausage and egg McMuffin for you. John McGurk is the editor of the Irish website Gripped, which is a terrific publication that I commend to you, and I particularly commend his piece on this very topic. John, you wrote just a few days ago about one of the weirder aspects of this new war, which is the way these new global corporations are leading the charge at sticking it to the Russians.
I did, Mark. I think it's fascinating. Obviously, people have strong views on the Russian-Ukraine war, as I do. I mean, I find Vladimir Putin's behavior to be historically awful. But at the same time, I think when these things happen, it's important sometimes to observe what's happening in the world and the way it's happening. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting, and have found particularly interesting watching over the last couple of weeks, has been the way so many global corporations, for the first time that I can remember, or not being that old, recall from recent history, corporations have been majorly involved in leading the charge to effectively, as you said, cancel Russia. Now, you can, as I do, think that cancellation is well deserved, while still being a little bit perturbed at the manner and the power that is on display. Because we live in a world now where a couple of companies that are, firstly, not democracies, secondly, not accountable to any real political power when you're a globe-spanning corporation, have the power to effectively isolate and banjax, to use an Irish word, the economy of the world's second or third military power. It's an astonishing state of affairs. And what I think we should be thinking about, I want to connect it very briefly, if you don't mind, to something else. If you look at in the US, the story about the Hunter Biden laptop, where we now know, for example, that Facebook and Twitter explicitly suppressed a news story that was true in order to help a political candidate they favored in the largest democracy in the world. I think when you look at those two things, I mean, when I was a kid, we used to read dystopian novels about the future where the world was no longer governed by the people, but by a bunch of megacorps. And I think we're probably, we're not quite there yet, but we're closer to that becoming a reality at this point in human history than we've been really since the days of the American Industrial Revolution and the railroad magnates.
Yep. Well, I think it's actually more than that. Since you bring up the railroad magnates, the rap on corporations, particularly from the left, is that they're just all about money. They're only interested in money, which is how traditionally they behave. I mean, if you go back, whatever it is now, 85 years, I think it is, to when the Irish Free State introduced the Control of Manufactures Act. And as you may recall, Guinness upped and moved its corporate headquarters from Dublin to London. Now, that doesn't reflect any particular position on the merits of Ireland or England. Guinness was just thinking about the bottom line. And in some strange way, I'm slightly disturbed by the fact that these new kinds of corporations aren't thinking about the bottom line. They're taking what purports to be a moral stance, but also an ideologically, politically activist stance, which would have been thought totally weird back in when Guinness made that decision.
That is, we share that view. The most disturbing thing is that we live in an era of progressive cultural imperialism, whereby there is one approved line of thought on almost every hot button topic of the day. I saw the other day, I don't want to hang on censorship too often, but the Babylon Bee, an American satirical website which awarded one of Joe Biden's transgender cabinet secretaries the title of Man of the Year, was banned by Twitter and other social media platforms on the basis, I think, that it had, I know that it had offended against the established line of thought on the issue of gender, which is that there are as many genders as there are stars in the sky. And I think that when you combine that dominant progressive cultural imperialism, which says you shall not disagree with us on these issues and remain a member of polite society, with the corporate power to cancel whole countries, which we now have, you live in a very dangerous society. And I would wonder, to speculate, for example, what might become next of countries like Poland and Hungary that have distinctive political lines on these issues, or what might happen to the UK government if, for example, Boris Johnson ever decided to reverse his government's policy on gender self-recognition. At that point, do the corporate overlords in California, in Silicon Valley, in the face of pressure, not from their shareholders, but just from their employees, that's another interesting thing, it's employee power now in these companies, decide to retaliate against the British state, for example? It's not as unthinkable as that would have been even 6 months ago. And I think these things are, one of the things we're constantly seeing is the unthinkable 6 months ago becoming the reality today. And the pace at which the acquisition of power from these companies is advancing is incredible. If you go back to a year and a bit ago, it would, I think, have been unconscionable. Nobody would have imagined that a group of American companies would come together, for good or ill, to effectively muzzle the sitting president of the United States, which they did. I mean, at the time, the president of the United States, and by the way, so we're clear, by the way, I wouldn't have voted for him. But he was the sitting president of the United States, and they took away his power to communicate with the public and left it entirely in the hands of their corporate-owned media companies. And that is an astonishing extension of corporate power. And now, less than a year later, we're seeing these same companies extend that power to directly interfere in international events by effectively, in my view, correctly, but the power is still remarkable, cancel a country. And when you have these threats in society, I wonder what the next frontier is, because it's coming.
Well, I think there is the next frontier, because, as you say, at the same time as these companies, Western multinationals, have waged this blitzkrieg on Russia. At the same time, we have this campaign in the West against oligarchs. And oligarchs aren't really that different from, say, the Zuckerberg at Facebook or the guy at Twitter. Not really. They just happen to be Russians who have a ton of money. And because they have the wrong political views, everyone's going around confiscating their yachts and their football clubs, as in the case of Chelsea. And that in itself is slightly weird to me. In America, the proposed legislation under which this is being done explicitly eschews any mention of Russia and says that Joe Biden can, in fact, do this to anybody. So that on the one hand, he can seize an oligarch's super yacht, but on the other hand, he can take your Ford Cortina if he's minded to do so. This is also disturbing, I think.
There's a huge danger here, and I mean, nobody understands the anger people feel about what's happening in Ukraine better than I. It's utterly appalling. But sometimes when these things are happening, and our emotions get very head up, we throw the baby out, to use an old phrase, with the bathwater. I mean, I've seen things mooted, for example, like the idea of taking the Russian government's foreign reserves, effectively stealing them and using them to rebuild Ukraine, which is an idea that feels on the face of it completely just. That seems like a really just thing to do. The difficulty is we do not know what long-term, medium-term effect that will have on confidence in currency markets, reserves, the whole basis of our economic system. If governments can just seize assets belonging to people and other countries on the basis of political disagreements, there's huge danger there that we're not thinking about. And it's being combined with this. We are already in a culture where we have very powerful companies that all have the same political viewpoint, by and large, on the issues of the day. Not necessarily economics. It's very odd. They don't care what your VAT rate is necessarily, but they really do care what your laws on abortion or gay marriage or euthanasia are, which I find extraordinary. But when you have all those political views that are effectively homogenized, and you place in those people's hands the power to silence individuals, including the most powerful elected individual in the world, and shut down trade. I mean, if you look at, we're talking a lot about Facebook and Twitter, but if you look at what Maersk did, the global shipping company, when they announced that they wouldn't allow their containers to be used in Russian ports, I mean, that shatters Russia's power to trade with anybody, even a country that hasn't placed sanctions on it. And it's being done from a corporate boardroom. And this is the important point, a corporate boardroom that is not elected by anybody. It is accountable to nobody. Yeah. The only people it's accountable to are its shareholders, who, ironically, to bring back to your point about oligarchs, are largely across these major companies a small group of major investment firms controlled by the same people. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but it's interesting how many of these major corporations have the same small group of major shareholders, and how much power, political power, economic power in the West is concentrated in the hands of a very small number of people. So it's easy and right, by the way, to look at Russia and look at the kleptocracy that country is. I don't think the West is a kleptocracy, but we have some of the same patterns over here that I think, if we wish to avoid going down that road of untrammeled political power, we would be wanting to look at curbing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, John. And it's particularly important for small countries at a time when even knowledge, access to knowledge, even access to finding out who owns certain corporations is controlled by a handful of woke billionaires. Thank you very much for that, John. And you can read John at Gripped in Ireland, which he edits, and it's an excellent publication in a jurisdiction that could use more, sad to say. Are you one of these anti-vaxxer types opposed to making employment and restaurant admission conditional on being jabbed every 3 months? Or are you just a bit wary about some of the consequences of COVID? That is all coming up later. And we will also talk to Ukraine's youngest MP. Straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You live here, and because this part of Ukraine has been part of Hungary and Czechoslovakia, so you're part of the Hungarian minority here. And how have the Hungarians in Transcarpathia reacted? Have many gone back to Hungary?
I don't know. 200,000 people.
Yeah, 200,000 have gone to Hungary. Do you think Ukraine is winning the war?
Yes.
And that's bad news for the Russians.
Putin kaput.
Putin kaput. Putin kaput. That's me and one of the many brave citizens I met on the streets of Ukraine in recent days. He's determined to see off the Russians. We'll have more from Ukraine later. But let's get to your comments. Rosemary says, why is nobody talking about Putin's puffy face? Can you please get a medical opinion? To me, it looks remarkably like the effects of steroids, which I've seen in my relatives. You're right, it does look like the effects of steroids when you get that puffy face. I would also say, interestingly about Putin, is that he takes social distancing super seriously. That's why he put Emmanuel Macron way down the end of that football field length table that he was sitting at. You can't get near to him. You've got to be jabbed and tested and retested and re-jabbed before you can get into the same room as Putin, which suggests he has some underlying condition, because all the other world leaders, the minute the cameras are off, are all hugging and a kissing and a touching you. You can't keep Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, you can't keep her hands off you if once the cameras are gone. They're all suddenly super kissy, huggy. Not Putin. Something's going on. Gareth says, Dear Mark, for the sake of the world, in the name of God, can we keep Biden and Harris out of the Ukraine conflict? You can't, because it's working well for them in the polling numbers. They were facing a bloodbath in the midterm elections for November in the United States, and then suddenly Biden stages this phony war with no troops, no American troops. So it's not like Afghanistan. There's no shock and awe and then the slow bleed over 20 years to a humiliating defeat. There's none of that. It's a way of him getting all the kudos of a war without actually having to go to war. So it's working for him in electoral terms. Sonia says, who's really running things? It has to be E.T., even Schwab et al. Aren't this clever? Okay, so for conspiracy theorists, if you're trying to keep up, the senior globalists, these big shot globalists like Klaus Schwab in his Bond villain getup, Ming the Merciless, that's just what they want you to think. Who's behind the guys in the Ming the Merciless costume? Paul says, I hope Mark Steyn can continue to educate the British public about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. The likes of IroMG, I believe that's the Twitter handle of Mike Graham on the wireless, could learn a lot from Mark. Yeah, he said he didn't go for the Klaus Schwab thing. Maybe he's the guy behind Klaus Schwab. But it's clear that our leaders are not the guys running anything. I mean, when you look at Biden and Harris, obviously they're not running anything. They barely, did you hear Kamala Harris's explanation? She was asked on some radio show to explain Ukraine in terms ordinary people could understand. And so she goes, well, Ukraine is a country. It's a country in Europe, and it's next door to Russia, which is another country. These people aren't, whoever is running the world, it isn't these guys. Okay, Boris, I'll tell you one thing I enjoyed about Ukraine, by the way. No COVID. No masking, no nothing. It's amazing how unimportant all that drivel is when the Russians are bombing you and firing rockets through your apartment house every night. I absolutely loved, one thing I loved about it was completely no COVID. It's a completely post-COVID society. It may be a post-society society if the Russians have their way, but it's great to be in a land without COVID and without COVID restrictions. Well, Boris Johnson, as you know, has pledged to hold a public inquiry into the COVID. In a letter to the Times this week, 54 scientists, follow the science, 54 scientists have said such an inquiry must investigate the effects of lockdowns and the like on children. Joining me now from the Daily Skeptic, which has been on this thing from the beginning, is Will Jones. Will, basically every aspect of COVID public policy, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the reporting of deaths or side effects of the vaccines, has been exposed as riddled with errors that cannot be accidental, not when they're in every aspect. But the brutality of the public policy when it comes to children is really in a league of its own.
Absolutely. The thing we have to remember with this pandemic is that children are the people who are least at risk from this virus. The risk to children from this virus is statistically zero. It's in terms of being seriously injured. You know, they might get a sniffle or basically a cold, but they're so little affected by it, and yet they're the people in our society who we should be protecting, and yet they're the ones who are most affected and most harmed by all the crazy and extreme interventions that we suddenly decided in 2 years ago tomorrow that we would impose in order to try to supposedly control this virus, and it's been horrendous for them, absolutely. And this inquiry needs to really emphasise and look into the impacts on them.
I suppose we're likely to get a royal commission, but I would like it to be more of something closer to the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because I think there are very disturbing aspects to this that are still ongoing and which will be with us for decades. I mean, if you look at the increase in suicide attempts by adolescent girls in the United States, if you think of the admission by the Premier of New South Wales just the other day that in fact they know all this COVID rules at school make absolutely no difference at all, that it's just theatre to keep the media off their back. The revelations that political leaders responsible to their people keep coming out with in itself shows there should be something, almost like a criminal inquiry. If they can investigate Cakegate, why can't they investigate this?
Absolutely, this inquiry needs to dig down properly into the harms of lockdown and whether it's really necessary. There's a real risk that this inquiry could just scratch the surface, could ask the wrong questions. We've seen the level of analysis in a lot of the mainstream media during the pandemic has been so shallow. It seems to have amounted to questioning whether we were locking down or restricting fast enough, hard enough. Never really looking at the data and the evidence that was showing that we shouldn't be doing it at all, and that it was harmful and doing far more harm than good. I mean, you only have to look at the at the harms to children. That there's 100,000 ghost children that we've heard about. That's children who were on registers for schools before the pandemic, and they're not there anymore. And these are some of the most vulnerable children, the most deprived children in the country. And where are they? Why are they not at school? We're just letting them down. These 54 scientists that you mentioned who wrote to the Times today, and good on them for doing that. And many of them not scientists who necessarily signed letters like this before. So really putting their heads above the parapet, some of them for the first time. So fantastic to see that. And they raised the issues of the fact that mental health problems for children up 50% from pre-pandemic, from 1 in 9 children to now 1 in 6 children having mental health problems. Obesity rates up 20%. It's just and earlier analysis showed that just after the first lockdown, that on average, the average primary school child was over 3.5 months behind in maths, and that was just after one lockdown, and that was rising to over 5.5 months in some parts of the country, like Yorkshire. So these harms are just there's just so many of them. I mean, this is just scratching the surface really of this impact of not just closing schools, but of telling children that to regard themselves and other people primarily as carriers of disease, and to stay away from people, and stay away from their friends, stay away from their place of education, from their social life, and from the places where they learn. And it's just and you raised the suicide rate as well. There's new statistics out about that showing that the suicide, and not just suicide, because there was a confusion last year that some of the data didn't seem to back up the anecdotal evidence that we've been hearing of increased suicide attempts and people going through with it. But the new data shows that actually does confirm that has been a real spike in that, and it's not just in the suicides; it's also in drug overdoses and alcoholism, and particularly in teenagers. And so it's and all these harms, and we saw with the scientists pointed out that the priorities for the government are often very wrong, we can. So pubs, for example, were fully reopened before schools were reopened in 2020, and which was
that's completely that's completely ridiculous. What I hope doesn't happen, Will, is that. Thank you for that, by the way. What I hope doesn't happen is that we now have a ludicrous situation where the fact the government is using the Ukraine war, governments all over the West are using the cover of the war to say, okay, COVID's over, it's not working for us anymore, let's move on. Because that's not good enough. We actually need to hold the people to account who were responsible for the most disastrous public policy decisions in living memory outside of war. So I thank you for that, Will, and I particularly thank the Daily Skeptic for all the fine work they have done on this. Thank you very much. Sviatoslav Yurash is the youngest member of parliament in Ukrainian history. He sits for the Servant of the People Party. He turned 26 just a week before the Russians invaded, and he joins me now. Sviatoslav, how are things holding up in Ukraine? I was there a couple of days ago, and people were optimistic, but I think the optimism has kind of increased in recent days.
We are defiant. I mean, I'm in Kiev right now, and we have rocket attacks day in, day out, night in, night out. We have people that are being lost every single day, not just in Kiev, but all across the country. Russians aren't exactly keeping their weapons down. They are shooting, they're attacking, they're trying to take us down. But the reality is it only drives our desire for justice here in those battles that we are waging right now outside of Kiev.
Yes, but it's interesting to me that the Russian advance has stalled, and that, for example, the Ukrainian military's pushback, particularly on the south coast, I mean, the Russians are nowhere near taking Odessa, which is one of their objectives. And in fact, they're being effectively pushed back, both in central Ukraine and on the Black Sea coast. So you must be heartened by that.
The reality is Putin's main mistake was believing his own propaganda. He believed that he'll be welcomed in Ukraine, that people will come out with flowers to greet him, but the reality is the opposite. We are united as ever, both in political terms, as the parliament votes unanimously for every single legislation supporting the war, and as a nation. People coming out on the streets in occupied cities with their bare hands in Ukrainian flags to show that they want Ukraine to stay, that they want us to win, and joining in every other part of Ukraine, military, in all different shapes and forms to defy Russia and beat them back. We have no choice. It's our country, nowhere to leave, nowhere to go, and we will fight for it to the end.
How do you feel as a parliamentarian? Because you have rather fewer colleagues than you did a couple of days ago. President Zelensky has banned certain Russian pro-Russian parties, as he calls them, that one of which has, I think, 10% of the seats in the Ukrainian parliament. How do you feel about his decision to restrict the number of political parties in Ukraine? And while we're at it, his plan to merge all the television networks into one state television network. How do you feel about that?
Well, first about the Prussian parties. I mean, the party you speak of is a party which headed by the person who has Putin as the godson to his child, and he has been bringing his party members to Russia at every single occasion that he got. His party was time and time again not voting for legislation on the matter of territorial integrity, independence of Ukraine. So it's as pro-Russian as it comes. As far as all the other parties, they are non-active as far as Ukraine. In reality, they are remnants of the past, basically. The show of force that we have a wartime situation in which we have basically to prepare and get our nation ready to beat back the enemy and all the tools that he's using to try and cow us into submission. As far as the TV channels, it's not that. We have all the TV channels are right now in Ukraine united in one single marathon, which is going on permanently, and they just change places, who is speaking when, and try to transmit enough message to support the country, to transmit relevant information to the people where they can get help, support, humanitarian assistance, where they can sign up to join the fight. So it's a question of all the nation uniting as ever to again beat back the second biggest army in the world and the biggest nation on earth.
What's the mood like among your fellow Ukrainians? As I said, I got back from Ukraine just at the weekend. But I didn't get far into central or eastern Ukraine. What is the disposition of the people? Because everyone's surprised that after what happened in Mariupol, that people haven't. We can't take this anymore. We need to sue for surrender terms. And yet nobody in Ukraine actually seems to be thinking like that. The more he bombs you, the more you defy him and want to push on. Is that how it is with most of the people?
Absolutely. I mean, Kyiv right now is turning into a fortress city. It's our capital. City of millions, which is now fast becoming a city well prepared for whatever Russians throw at us. And discussion about it, colon Russians are massing north of Kyiv is irrelevant because Kyiv essentially beefed up its defenses to defy every single thing the Russians throw at us. And the point is the instruments of resistance are plentiful. Citizens have been joining territorial defense units, army units, signing up to try and join the fight. They are receiving the weaponry they can. And again, the fight is happening right now in the outskirts town out of Kyiv. And the Russians are trying to cut a supply lines to the west. And local people there are doing everything possible to destroy Russian weapons, Russian arms, Russian soldiers coming in, and are showing clearly that Kyiv is not going to be occupied or cut off.
Well, that's very good and very heartening to hear. I had a lovely time in your country. With lovely people who treated me with such kindness. I shall never forget it, and I can't wait to come back to Ukraine. And in the end, whatever people have to say about anything, you were invaded and you've pushed back against the invader in ways that I think it's difficult not to find inspiring. To be able to hold off the Russian military, even at their most incompetent, is a hugely impressive feat. Thank you very much, Sviatoslav, and I wish you all the best as this thing goes on. Thank you. We're coming right back, and we got a lot more for you. What do we got for you? Oh, I think we got a little while the world is at war. Why don't we lighten things up with the really important stuff like transgender issues? Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, why were the mainstream media hell-bent on pushing COVID hysteria and ignoring the costs of lockdown? Former ITV and Sky News director Mark Steyn pulls back the curtain as my lockdown inquiry continues. And I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. The former Daily Star editor and current columnist Dawn Neeson, the conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hey, have you seen USA Today's Woman of the Year? Here she is. Yeah. Not the one on the left. She's okay if you're boring and into cis women, but she's got nothing on the cutie on the right. That's Rachel Levine, the first 4-star transgender admiral in American history, or anybody's history as far as I can tell. But there's never been a better time for transgender 4-star admirals. Everybody needs them. There's never been a better time to be a woman, especially if you're a man. And let's face it, men make much better women than lousy old biological women do. Here's another Woman of the Year, Leah Thomas, the first transgender swimmer to win the NCAA Ladies Swimming Championship in America. People get into trouble for misgendering her, so if I were to refer to Leah as he or him, I'd be blowing up what passes for my career and you'd never hear from me again. But there's no chance of me doing that because she is so obviously all woman. Let's take a look at Leah. She is all woman. From her broad shoulders, complete lack of breasts, slim hips, and a full set of meat and 2 veg discreetly tucked inside her lady's bathing suit. I know that's everything I'm looking for in a woman. And you are too. If you're wondering how I know about her wedding tackle, it's because her college teammates have complained about her flaunting it in the girls' locker room. But let's face it, if you're the best endowed gal on campus, who wouldn't want to show it off? When Leah Thomas won her championship, the number 2 and number 3 placed women were such sore losers that they invited the 4th placed lady to join them on stage and huddled at 3rd place together. Where's their sense of fair play? Those 3 gals should be lucky they're allowed in the pool at all, considering they haven't got a testicle between the 3 of them. Deborah So is the hostess of the Dr. Deborah So podcast and the authoress of the book, The End of Gender, and we're always delighted to see her. Deborah, the whole Leah Thomas thing is interesting to me because it seems to be testing our limits on this. This is someone, whatever one feels about trans issues, people usually go to a lot of things that most of us wouldn't want to undergo, whether it's hormone treatment and the surgical removal of our most intimate parts. But none of that applies here. This is someone who has the body, hasn't done a thing to their body, but has simply announced that even though the body is unchanged, they're a woman and they're now going on the women's swim team. So it seems like some kind of test of how far this can be pushed.
Oh, absolutely. It's always great to see you, Mark. Thank you for having me back. I mean, I think that this issue with trans athletes in women's sports, the same in terms of who's being allowed in women's spaces. I know there was a case recently in the UK regarding a rape that happened in a hospital on the women's ward that had been actually, I mean, there was no record of this because apparently everyone on the ward had been recorded as female, but there was actually a trans woman there. And so, I mean, this is a larger ideology that is showing up everywhere. It's targeting children at increasingly younger ages. And so I think what's happening in sport, even if people do start to push back, it's going to keep popping up in other areas. And it's really quite disturbing what's happening.
I'm puzzled as to why women and champions of women do not speak out about it. I mean, I feel sorry for these individual athletes. You train and train and train, and then somebody who's like 6 inches taller than you and with a totally different body mass just waltzes in and snaffles the thing that was your hopes and dreams. So I feel that just breaks any kind of idea of fair play in sport, apart from anything else. But I'm surprised, but it's difficult to sort of champion that and turn it into a cause when so many of the women directly involved remain silent about it. Why do you think that is?
Well, like you said, there are definitely differences between people who are born male and born female, and these differences are not overridden by hormonal suppression or taking estrogen. I do think people are afraid. They're scared of activists. Many people understandably don't want to be branded as transphobic for life for speaking out against trans activists. But I also think it speaks to, for many people, they're busy, they have their lives, you know, they have a mortgage, paying for gas is increasingly more expensive. Day-to-day life is difficult enough. So why would you want to speak out against this unless you are personally affected by it? So we do see with, say, female athletes who are having to compete against trans athletes in their division, they are growing increasingly uncomfortable and vocal, and more people are speaking out, going on the record about this. But I think also what speaks to the issue is that, say, with Leah Thomas's teammates, there have been media reports that within the team they are split. So some people were not in favor of her competing, and some were. And so I think this does go back to the larger ideology, this idea that people are being taught in school that there are no differences between men and women, that you can pick your gender, that these differences between men and women are socially constructed. And so if you honestly believe that the only difference between men and women are socially imposed, and that in the name of equity and inclusion, this is the right thing to do, then of course you would think it's only bigoted people who are trying to say that trans women should not be competing in sports and that any differences actually don't matter.
But to go back to that hospital case in the English hospital you mentioned, the reason they didn't report that is because under English law, only a man can commit rape. So even though a rape had been committed by someone with a penis, as they saw it, that person with a penis was a woman and therefore could not have committed rape as defined in English law. In other words, the old line about who you're going to believe, me or your lying eyes, I mean, they're not actually believing what is before their eyes. We've reconfigured millions and millions of people to look at something very basic in a completely different way.
Right. And I mean, in this case, and in any case, when it comes to women's rights versus transgender activism, women are always going to be the ones to pay the price, because this activism is inherently anti-woman. And I am in favor of rights for trans individuals. I support them in their transition. I'm critical of childhood transition because this has been shown by research to not be the best way forward, as I discuss. I discuss all these issues and the science in the end of gender. But, you know, when it comes down to it, it's beyond me the fact that people who claim to care about women will be so fast to turn it against women and kick them into the ditch when it comes down to the bullying and intimidation of trans activists.
No, that's actually very true, Deborah. And it's sad to me. You said that people just want to get on with their lives, and I can understand that if you're an accountant or you're a waitress or whatever. But it seems to me odd that so many professional feminist activists have stayed silent on this, with the exception of J.K. Rowling and Margaret Atwood. And I think that's because, as imaginative novelists, they sort of see something down the road as actually leading towards ultimately the abolition of women. Thank you very much. As you said, you were ahead of all this in your book, and your book is a terrific read, Deborah. That's Deborah So, the author of The End of Gender. Let's get to, let's see if we can do a couple of questions before we close things out. John says, where have over 2 million Ukrainian refugees gone? They seem to have disappeared into Europe's spare room. Well, I was in Hungary recently, and in Budapest, I've never seen so many cars with Ukrainian license plates just all over the streets. Never seen that before. And they're little cars. They're like, Honda Civics or Volkswagen Golfs or whatever they are, but you can tell, even if you don't spot the license plate, you can tell they're Ukrainian because they've got all their possessions packed up in the back of that car. So there's like sleeping bags all piled up to the roof of the car in the back. And I also stayed in a refugee kind of hotel, and it's kind of noisy because a lot of those rooms have got 9 people in them. So that's Don says, how long has President Biden got left in the top job of running our beloved free world? Well, they have to wait until January 2023, and then if they stick Kamala in, she can serve 2 years and then 2 full terms. So she'll be president for 10 years. But that's January 2023. That'll do it. Dan Wootton's about to titillate your Tuesday as only he can. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello again. Following Tuesday's warm sunshine, skies remain clear overnight, and that will lead to temperatures dipping away, a chilly night for many, before sunshine returns once again on Wednesday. We're in a very static weather pattern at the moment. High pressure is sitting strongly to the east and keeping low pressure away to the west. In between, a warm southerly airflow is leading to, well, cloud-free skies for many, and it stays that way overnight. But of course, at this time of year, the ground quite quickly loses its heat. We're still looking at a 12-hour nighttime period, and as a result, temperatures dipping close to freezing in a few spots. So chilly starts to Wednesday. 1 or 2 fog patches as well, most likely Vale of York, for example, and other parts of northeast and eastern England. But for many, it's a sunny start, and it stays that way through the day. Temperatures rising quickly through the morning, more warmth to come, a bit more of a breeze at times for the far southwest, a bit of patchy cloud here as well. Cloud bubbling up elsewhere, but for the vast majority, it's just bright blue skies. It's dry and it's warm. 18 or 19 Celsius, the top temperature. The far north of Scotland, northwest England, North Wales, southeast England as well. So quite a few places seeing that warmth. And then heading into the evening, well, we do it all again under clear skies. Temperatures drop away and a few fog patches will form, but really for most will stay fog-free. And frost-free, temperatures in towns and cities dipping to 4 to 7 Celsius. But really it's in sheltered spots where they'll be closer to freezing. Now, one change on Thursday is that we'll pull in a bit more cloud from the Atlantic across the north and northwest of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well. That cloud could contain a few spots of rain. But for the vast majority, it's another sunny, dry and warm day. Perhaps not quite as warm as Tuesday and Wednesday, but feeling pleasant in the sunshine nevertheless. Friday's looking remarkably similar, and Saturday is too.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask.